Welcome to International Women's Day panel on economics of equity. We're going to be talking about a couple of things. One is this idea of a glass cliff, the idea of a hidden leadership trap, and the other thing is the economics of equality. This is something that's been touched on in Katarina's talk today. So, welcome, Maria. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, first of all, in terms of what is this glass cliff, the issue is that women get promoted during times of crisis. And we just had COVID. I mean, it's over for some, it's kind of still going on for other people in terms of the changes to the organizational structure. And while it might have been a chance to step up for some women, and women continue to be promoted, the question is, are we being set up for failure or set up for future success? That's the glass cliff conundrum. So when women are given high risk leadership roles, if are they in a situation where they're just being a scapegoat, as we would say, or set up for blame if it goes wrong? And if it goes right, someone else will get the credit? That's an issue we're going to talk about today. Maria, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So first of all, as I've already said in my initial comment, we have to celebrate what we have already accomplished. We are driving change. We are fostering collaboration. We are creating impact in our teams and organizations. But leadership doesn't always come as a level playing field. Sometimes women do break into leadership roles, but they are placed in situations where failure is more likely, set up to struggle rather than set up for success. They are lacking resources, they are not being supported enough. It's not a long-term commitment. Actually, I've read a report that said even if women get promoted into leadership positions, they are more likely to be drawn back into their previous position in the first 3 years, and that's not the statistics for men. So there's a gap there also. It's one of these hidden leadership traps that many women don't see coming. We work hard to break the barriers and reach that proposal, that leadership position, and finally get a seat in that table, only to find out that the table is already on fire, let's say. What do we do? Can
Yeah,
we get the
indeed.
examples to reach the solution afterwards?
Yeah, we do. We do. That's the next slide.
Yeah.
And here's some interesting examples. Have you looked at that? The General Motors who took over during a major crisis. Marissa Mayer, I know her story well because I come from Silicon Valley, and she led the struggling company, but took all kinds of grief. And so many of the faults of the design of the company, the structure of the company, the economic model of the company somehow got placed on her lap when basically she had just walked in the door, you could say. It wasn't necessarily all about what she had done. And yet, she was completely given full responsibility for the blame of the problems of the company. And of course, she does take some burden. If you're the leader of the company, you do. But it was, let's call it, an unequal balance. And then in UK politics, I think we can all remember the recent UK PM that came in during a very tumultuous time, and again was blamed for basically causing the problem, which maybe she did, but it was also the problem was already there in part. So it's the issue of these are just examples. Maybe you have an experience somewhere on this call, someone's had an experience of having someone get a job, get a promotion, or even just take more responsibility for their job in some way, and yet felt like they were being set up for failure. Let's just see if we have any comments or questions. Maria, can you see that? Or maybe Shav, if you have
I
any.
think Maria has written something. This was really needed to hear. I thought I was the only one who had such an experience and that it only happened to me. There was no support from management and I was walking a path where I was set up to fail. The worst part is that they said, I knew you couldn't. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh,
And yeah. And we've all been there, Maria. Actually, me and Liz, in our pre-session calls, we shared an experience like that exactly. So anyone other than Maria from the group that has been through such a situation or similar?
And maybe while you're waiting for comments, a couple of thoughts. One is that's the power of this group we belong to, the Women in Projects Network. And that's because sometimes, I mean, my being a partner when there was only one woman partner in the country, um, that's a real thing, right? That you don't have a support group, a reality check, you feel gaslighted, and you don't have anyone to frame against that. And that's one thing we can be for each other, both cheering each other on, but also checking reality. And I think that's really important. And also for the men who are on the call, I just want to say this isn't about male bashing, it's about societal dynamics. And it takes everyone involved to change things. So please don't take this as a negative. It's not that every person is like this. My husband is certainly not like this, but where it happens because we're in a male dominated society, especially in leadership. Any other comments, Maria, or thoughts?
Asta has been through this kind of situation also, she says. So let's give her our support as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Going on to the next slide. Would you like to take that, Maria?
No, go on. I will share my experiences later on.
Okay. So the question is, why does this happen? Well, sometimes the fact is, if you look at data about women, we are better at handling crisis, dealing collaboratively, and problem solving, focusing on problem solving. It's partly because women are natural collaborators for a variety of reasons, partly societal, partly sort of just, child rearing kind of culture where women helped each other. That goes back from women having children and having their mothers and grandmothers help them to in the office, women just tend to be more collaborative. Now, that's not always true. That's a little bit of a stereotype, but I find it has a real track record of being true. Now, that's the great news. The bad news is that when we are put into a bad situation, one that's not fixable, we often step up anyway because we feel like we should try, or we are people pleasers like me. I gotta say, that's one of my main faults is that I will try to please people even at my own detriment. So for these reasons, we step up. But then what happens? We have a higher risk of failure. As I mentioned before, and as I think Astrid mentioned, we don't have a lot of support and we don't have a lot of resources. This is also something Maria just said. So we're judged more harshly. The setback is bigger and it can actually critically wound our career. We can be seen as the problem child. She was too weak to handle it, or whatever the version of that is. And the consequences to our psyche can be incredible. It can be hard to stand up after being knocked down from such an event, even when you have all the skills you need. So before we go on to break the cycle, let me just check in with my colleague.
Yes, everything you've just said is just, it's contributing to a disengaged environment and a disengaged team because others see that also. And that's what Coach Khan will be addressing also. Yeah, I want to contribute a lot on what the solutions are, what we can do to break that cycle. So
let's do that.
First of all, recognize that pattern and call it out. Call it out from wherever you see it, even if it's a man who's been through that situation. He's been there, we will be there. You have to call it out. And then what a woman can do faced in this situation. And that's one of the first lessons I had to take during my working struggles, let's say, to overcome the glass ceiling, is learn to say no in situations like that. If the situation given to you, the talents given to you, the promotion is not set up for success, or they are not able to negotiate anything with you, then learn to say no. So negotiate support before accepting the role. What do you need? You need support, call it out. You need resources, then ask for them. If the answer is no to all of them, why do you say yes? No. If they say no most of the times, then you can also say no. And coming from my example, the situation I've been into, I was already filling out for 2 colleagues that had left the job and was doing basically 3 jobs all parallelly. And they wanted to promote me to a leadership position. And the first thing I've asked them, okay, so who is going to be filling my position? Well, I'm already filling up for 2 other colleagues. No one's coming. No resources coming. So I said, no, I cannot take that on. I have 3 small children at home. I cannot take up more work. So I said no. I quit supporting the gaps for the 2 colleagues that left and solely focused on my own career in the one job that I had, and I excelled at it. So guess what? Promotion came 1 year later with the right circumstances. We have to shift the narrative. We need to push for women to be seen as strategic, long-term leaders, not just crisis managers. We have to build resilient leadership pipelines. Companies must actively mentor and develop women for leadership roles. And if you cannot get that support from your own organization, then there's us. We support women, we mentor women in this, in situations that we've already been there, okay? And we need to redefine success metrics. Organizations should assess leadership performance over the long term, not just short-term results, rather than expecting quick fixes in crisis situations. So that's my take.
Thank you. That was really good. And do feel free to chime in if you have anything. We've got a couple more slides, and then we wanted to open it up for discussion. So if you have a thought.
I think we have a comment by Lindsay. I have been assigned failing projects by my male director rather than he managed the male managers who were failing. However, I delivered the project. Lesson for me to better call out this type of delegation, perhaps. Yes.
Yeah. I do know it also happens to men, but I think it just statistically happens to women a lot more. So good on you, Lindsay. You did the right thing. Now I wanted to go on to the economics of equity. One of the things people often think is there's sort of not enough to go around. There's not a big enough pie to go around for the world to be entirely equal. I think most of us would reject that hypothesis. It's sort of like the hypothesis that AI can be ignored in a way. It's a faulty hypothesis. So I wanted to go through with my colleague and talk about some of these gender gaps, but also then talk a little bit about these tick marks, which are some of the economic driven things that are true about these biases. These biases are not helpful, not just to the industry, not just to the men, but to society. That's everybody, everybody. So the first one is really asking the question, what's the cost of gender bias? And we talked about that in Katarina's talk, and I think that's great that it came up in the right point. The question is, how can we accelerate action? How can we mind the gap in bias in this case? And how can we accelerate action where you live? And you can put a comment in the chat. You can also raise your hand and talk it through if you want. But this issue about the AI gender bias, I think there's a couple of different levels to this, and then I'll get Maria's take on it. One bias is men, at least the men in my world, tend to be more ahead of the game on AI, have embraced it faster, et cetera. I mean, even if you look at YouTube, and I'm a YouTuber, you'll just, if you see things about embracing AI, it's more likely to be a guy talking about it. And that by itself kind of creates this bias that men are more astute or more capable or more on track. I don't know. But I know a lot of the women on this call, because I know a lot of you actually are the forefront of AI in your community. And we know that AI could make trillions of difference to the annual economy, and women are a part of that economy. So you could say, is it 2.6 or 4.4? the number doesn't matter, but let's look at the trend. If we have double the workforce, because women represent about 50% of the workforce who are AI inclusive, then that number can be bigger. So based on that, I would say we need to get the gender bias out of it, but also the gender bias around it. That's a goal I have. What do you think, Maria?
Everyone is talking about responsible AI nowadays. You know, gender bias is just one thing that we have to be mindful of. And I think we have already covered ways to call out or to correct AI bias when we see it. But developers, people who are integrating AI into their work, they have to be mindful and they have to do responsible AI. It's just a step in the process. As I've said in our previous webinar that we did on AI, I recently graduated from a postgraduate program from MIT in how to lead business growth through AI and ML initiatives. And they just said, responsible AI is just a major step in the whole process. You cannot deploy an AI tool without thinking of everything that the AI tool will be hallucinating about, because it's just coded that way to give you any result. So it will craft a solution for you, but not based on the right things.
Yeah, and we also talked about, and I know Rika is a real advocate of this, how learning prompt engineering can really help, including the prompt engineering of saying, "Dear AI, I'm asking you this fact. Please give me the supporting documentation so I can confirm this fact is true." And then you can look at a third or fourth or fifth party. I know that when I ask AI, it tends to give me 4 or 5 sources so I can really corroborate the information I'm given. In fact, I used AI to make this list, and I've given you, in terms of the data points, the part in blue there is links to the source material. So we'll put this out on our Women in Projects group, this actual PDF, and then you can check it out for yourself. But also we'll put a recording onto YouTube, so you'll have all of this for later. Now let's talk about climate action. This is one of those less thought about things. I mean, climate is a thing, and both Martin and I have been involved in a group called Sustainability Summit. We did that a year or two ago, and also PM for the World. Both of these parts of our PMI persona, you could say, are conferences thinking about the societal effects of big things happening, right? Big things happening externally in the world, like tsunamis and earthquakes, but also things happening that are totally man-made, like climate change and the lack of rain in some countries. Let's face it, lack of rain or too much rain is killing in at least my hometown of America, of California, and the related area that I used to live. I mean, the whole place is burned down. So climate action's big, but it really affects women in areas of poverty. And let's face it, that's basically Asia, the continent of Africa, places like that. The situation is dire. So the data points I have are from the World Economic Forum and the UN Women, that's the United Nations speaking, that by 2050, climate change may push another 150 million more women into poverty. And the cost of the gender-driven poverty, that's all poverty, but gender-driven especially, that is the poverty that women and children are experiencing, is up to $7 trillion. That's mind-boggling. Imagine if we had equality in our climate action programs, and that equality basically seeped through into the poorer population, which generally about 60% tends to be women and children. And in some locations, that's up to like 85% of the population. If there's poverty, it's women and children below the poverty line. Imagine how much money we'd have available to do good things in the world if we could adjust that number. So again, my question to you, Maria, what's your take?
Sadly so. Women are disproportionately affected by climate change. Yet, what we see, and it's really interesting, they lead some of the most effective sustainability efforts around the world. So they are community leaders and they are seen as that, but they are not policymakers. Why? Climate funding, policymaking, leadership roles still don't reflect the fact that women are making the difference in sustainability efforts. Women are making a future, they build a more sustainable future, because we are basically built that way. You know, we want a future that's more sustainable. And if we truly want to accelerate the action, we need to stop seeing women as community leaders. We have to see them as global climate decision makers. There are not so many women in those seats, so we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah, agree.
Yep, sorry.
Agree.
Yeah. So funding women-led sustainability initiatives, governments and corporations should increase investment in women's climate innovation projects. I think PMI is an advocate of that. Bringing women to the decision-making table. Women must be given equal representation in climate policy and leadership, and encouraging all of us to go into green tech, STEM careers. We need to create mentorship, sponsorship, education pathways, coaching to prepare the next generation of women to be climate leaders.
Absolutely. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to go on, but I will mention that in networking, I met a couple of women who were kind of in this space. So good to know.
Yes.
So I'm going to quickly run through the innovation gap. Obviously, women only represent about 2% of people that are VC funded. But here's the rub. If we were given equal participation as entrepreneurs, we would increase the GDP, the global GDP. That's incredible. Any summary take on your part, Maria?
No, I will leave at CoachCon to tell you how much impact does a disengaged environment and working place has, and partly major part of that is women being disengaged in their work in the workforce. Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue to CoachCon. Join us for the other events on International Women's Day. See the playlist below.